Chapter 78. It's time. Summary. It's been a long time coming, but it's finally here. Time to say goodbye to the siblings. As the blue planet slowly came into view, Mina knew how easily the ship could have been filled with silence, how the beginning of the end of their time together could have blanketed their group in a sad and uneasy air. But it had not. Instead, their ship was full of chirping voices and bright smiles as the blue sharpened into swirls of cyan seas and golden sands. "You're gonna love it," Pyropa enthused, tail swishing happily behind him. "The water there is so much better than that other planet." The boy stopped and turned to their little underwater plant. "No offense." Mina couldn't help but giggle at that. The siblings had just been going on and on about everything they wanted to show them once they finally arrived. Not even Katsuki had argued about spending a few days on hiatus, everyone wanting to make sure their last days with the siblings were the best they could be. Because after this, that would be it. They'd leave the siblings behind, return to everything the kids were stolen from, while they would continue on their journey home. While Mina didn't want to say goodbye, she wasn't about to drag two kids across the universe with them on dangerous missions. Even the distress calls they'd answered so they could get their brand out there were enough to make Mina worried for the kids. Sure, they were kept out of danger as much as they could be, but it certainly didn't feel very responsible to bring them so close to danger in the first place. Plus, this was a one-way trip. Once they got back to Earth, they were staying there for the foreseeable future. Despite how much it hurt, this was where they had to go their separate ways. "Everyone get ready," Izuku said, eyes focused in front of him. "We're about to enter the atmosphere." Gone was Fastel's normally laid-back attitude as they grabbed Pyropa's hand and ran up to the window. Both kids' tails were swishing, faces smushed right up against the glass, and Fastel was nonstop chirping and trilling. Mina steadied herself on the edge of the control panel behind the kids, half watching their bubbling anticipation, and half watching the shimmering ocean come into view. The water's surface sparkled like liquid pearl, the robin egg blue lightening where the waves met the sand. They were on course to land by Pyropa and Fastel's community in just a few minutes. She could only hope it went well. After the last water planet they visited that also had been recently visited by traffickers prior to their arrival, she wasn't so sure. There wasn't a good way to contact the settlement from space, the planet not being quite as high-tech. According to the siblings, their species never invented any form of space travel, instead being visited by an exploration vessel and eventually being welcomed into the Galactic Alliance, then trading for the tech. There was a little tension in the other teen's shoulders when the ship touched down just outside of the settlement, eyes scanning the surroundings for people. But no pastel-colored aliens came to greet them, even if that greeting would be less than friendly. The outside world was still. Mina stepped to the side as the kids ran past her. This didn't seem to worry them, so maybe it was normal. Pyropa was bouncing up and down by the door, and Fastel was pacing back and forth. Mina pushed off the nav console and followed the kids to the door as the others stood up. As Izuku opened the door, Mina heard the crackling of little explosions anxiously dance on Katsuki's skin. He was obviously weary of another bad encounter. He'd told them to be on guard, even if this was the siblings' home. So they were. They'd gotten off easy when they hadn't subscribed to the better safe than sorry mentality, but their luck could only last for so long. It was a bit dumb. It had taken a drugged rant to get through their thick skulls, but they'd eventually got there. Honestly, there was so much going on that Mina was worried they were missing something else obvious. that wasn't the focus right now. The door opened with a quiet whoosh, revealing the silent landscape. Pyarpa jumped out on the sand, moving effortlessly despite its shifting nature. Fastel stepped out, suddenly a lot more hesitant. "Is something wrong?" Ochako asks, slipping out next to them. "I can't hear anyone," they say. "Something's not right." This stops Pyarpa's frolicking, the boy turning to look at the town in the distance. The smile slips off his face. "Shit, guess this wasn't normal. So much for wishful thinking." Mina hops off the ship with the others, looking at the ghost town. The buildings aren't very tall. A few might just reach the alien equivalent of 3 stories. They look like they're made out of driftwood and sea stone, though large portions of the buildings are glass. The roofs are all bubbly, looking as though they're made of seaweed, or at least this planet's equivalent. Raised porches made way directly to the sandy ground, walking paths clear in the disturbed divots. There's no grid pattern to the scene, making the buildings look almost haphazardly placed. Some even look like they're about to be swallowed by the sea. "People were walking around normal recently," Izuku says. "The footprints are still clear in the sand, despite the breeze." "But where did they go?" Denki asks, walking towards the town. "Probably saw us coming and hid," Katsuki stated, arms crossed. "My guess, they swam away." Mina hummed and thought. They probably thought it was the traffickers back for round 2. So all they needed to do was let them know it wasn't. Problem solved. She turned to Fastel. "Any way you can let them know it's you two?" Their tails swished pensively. "We had drills for this kind of thing, where we had to leave the surface. Like if a Kyogyu wandered too close. After a while, someone would come to check if it was safe. It always was because it was a drill, but someone should come check eventually." "So we wait," Izuku declared. "We're finally home and now we have to wait more," Pyarpa groaned. "Just for a bit," Mina said, stretching her arms. "Then you can show us all the cool things you were talking about and introduce us to everyone." "Fine," he said, flopping onto the sand. Mina followed suit, staring up at the blue sky. It was somehow more blue than Earth's sky. She didn't know how that made sense, but it was true. Her head tilted to the side to look at the boy. This must be hard for them. She didn't want to imagine showing up at UA and then having to wait outside because everyone was hiding. But they'd all gotten pretty good at waiting, so it wasn't the end of the world. "I spy with my little eye," Denki droned, and Mina wanted to groan. "Something that is blue." "Is it the sky?" she said with a growing irritation. "How'd you know?" Maybe because we're both lying down on our backs and all we can see is the sky." Just as Mina was getting ready to smother herself out of pure boredom, she heard the splashing of water. Not the same gentle lapping that had been the backing track for hours, but something new. None of them were near the water, not wanting to scare any scouting parties, so this had to be one of those very scouting parties. She was going to let herself get absorbed by the sand if this was one of her family messing around in the water. "Pyarpa? Fastel?" a new, melodic, shell-shocked voice said. Mina scrambled to an upright position in the shifting sand, staring at the direction the sound had come from. And there, cutting through the waves gracefully, was someone who looked very much like the siblings. Pastel blue interspersed with swirling navy designs. Weird hair-like thingies all the way down their back. Fins in place of standard ears. It was about damn time! "Miss Meliar!" Both Pyarpa and Fastel shouted, running over to the water's edge. "Children!" the woman cried, and Mina had a feeling if their species could cry, tears would be spilling from Midoriya's eyes. "How? They took... Thank the gods, you two are okay." She rushed out of the water and onto the sand to meet the kids. The three came together in a hug, the woman holding them tight to herself. Trilling the way Mina had come to recognize was happiness. When the hug ended, the woman took Pyarpa's face in her hands and looked him over. "How did this happen? How are you here?" "They helped us, miss," Fastel said, gesturing back to where most of the teens were sat motionless in the sand. "They saved us. There's Fila." Mina had never heard that last word spoken in Basic before. It didn't really sound like the language, more lyrical in its nature, like the duet the siblings sang on the traffickers ship. Mirlar seemed to understand it, though, looking over at them with a warmth Mina hadn't felt in a while. "Thank you," she said. "You have done a service to our people greater than you can know. Our children are our treasure." Izuku smiled, like a warm summer evening. "We just wanted to make sure Pyarpa and Fastel are safe and happy. We're glad we could return them home to you." "I do not understand how you have done this. It seems too good to be true after they were taken by those monsters," Midoriya said, voice thick. "It's not all us. Without them, I don't think we could have made it. We saved each other on that ship." Ochako smiles. A little part of Mina twinges in discomfort at the information being shared, or more, what it hints to. She's not sure why. She trusts these people not to look at them differently, not to think they're weak despite their months of helplessness, not to treat them like glass just because they can't understand that they need things to feel normal again, not to minimize the horror they went through because it can't be that bad. Her class had been through that before on a lesser level after the USJ and training camp attack. Adults not knowing the right way to react. Well, except Dadzawa, but there was a reason he was the class dad. The first time, she didn't have a choice in whether people knew, with it being all over the news. She just had to accept it and move on. So she had. Mina thought she would react much the same this time, months after their imprisonment, but it just feels raw. Despite the time that had passed, despite shitty circle therapy, they hadn't really talked about their time on that ship more than a passing remark. Well, shit. She would have to do something about that before they left. They needed to make sure the kids were okay with everything before they couldn't talk to them face to face. Despite being on their home planet, back with the family they were torn from, with people who cared about them, Mina knew that people who didn't go through this wouldn't understand.